Howdy, howdy. We are live on another Friday night to start off the hashtag TQIF Friday night lineup. Every week we begin with a live Tex-Trek podcast, and then later on there's going to be some late night fun over on the Starfleet Boy After Dark channel. So stick around for that, but we'll just go ahead and dive right on in because we have a new episode of Star Trek Discovery to talk about. I'm Fatheree.
This is Dave.
This is Brian.
And this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
Welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 167th installment of the Tex-Trek podcast, the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas, where we take a deep look at Star Trek old and new, and proud members of the Trek Sphere Network. And tonight we are talking about Star Trek Discovery Season 4, Episode 3, Choose to Live, written by Terri Hughes Byrne and directed by Christopher J. Byrne. We're on a little bit of a time crunch for Brian because he's going to have to leave early. So we're going to try to let him get as much said in the opening statements as possible. Going to change up the format just a little bit. Before we go into that, though, I just want to remind everyone we're in the month of December. Christmas is coming up in a few weeks, and we actually are going to have Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve both on Friday nights. So that's normally when we do our live stream of the podcast, if you view or listen to us that way. So just so everyone knows, we're going to postpone those from Friday to Saturday. Those are actually going to come out on Christmas Day and New Year's Day, and I'm not sure who all is going to be available to show up. It might just be me in the audience or me and whoever can make it with, holiday plans and whatever. So those streams will happen, but they'll just be on Saturday instead of Friday, but we'll talk more about that as we get closer. Just wanted to put that on everyone's radar in case you were wondering. But Brian and Dave, are y'all ready to talk about Choose to Live?
Yeah, let's go on an away mission.
All right. Well, I'm just going to quickly recap things by reading the official synopsis, and then I'll expand on that with spoilers. But the official synopsis reads: Burnham and Tilly hunt the killer of a Starfleet officer as Stamets and the science team race against the clock to prevent the anomaly from killing anyone else. Basically, Burnham and Tilly and Mama Burnham, Gabrielle Burnham, they go after a rogue Kolat Malat nun who has killed a Starfleet officer. They find out she was doing this to steal dilithium for a moon full of sleeping aliens, and they help her get the aliens wake up and safe on their new planet, and they arrest her, and Stamets and Book go on a little science mission to the Science Institute on Navarre.
Land of the floating rock platform science council stages.
Well,
they looked super cool. I liked it.
Yeah, they look super cool, but they also look super like something that you would do with the AR screens. I'm starting to notice like everything that's shot on the AR screen on Discovery.
I need to read up more on those. I didn't pay close attention to how that tech worked, and I haven't watched the behind the scenes stuff. I need to watch the Ready Room where they talk about that.
Yeah, and it's similar to what they do on the other Star franchise's main show. So
Mm.
there's some stuff on Disney Plus about it there. But
Yeah, I think I'm glad that they weren't just meeting in like a I don't know like a boardroom, like or just some like an empty office. um, so I do appreciate that, but yeah, sometimes it does feel a little bit like they're spicing it up maybe somewhat unnecessarily.
Well, this is Discovery. It literally has problems because they give them too much money to spend. I mean, there's no particular reason why the Vulcans couldn't come aboard Discovery and they sit in the conference room and discuss all of this.
well, because they had the Vulcans come on board the ship last year, and we all bitched about not getting to see the surface of the planet.
No, I am fine with the fancy research meditation conference room thing. I liked it,
And they don't want to
I'm not
shoot. They
complaining.
don't want to shoot scenes with large crowds because this was all shot before most people had access to the vaccine in early 2021, and they had insane COVID procedures in place. And
That's
so
behind the scenes stuff. That shouldn't matter to we, the audience. They must present their best foot forward, whatever their circumstances.
yeah, but you were asking why, or so I was just explaining. But
You seem to be complaining that the foot was too much of the best foot. So look at how fancy that room is.
No, I actually thought the room looked. I think it looked pretty cool. It was just maybe a little showy. That's the level of my complaint.
well, they had to compensate for only being able to show like 6 or 7 people.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and get into our opening statements because, like I said, Brian will have to leave early. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get my opening statement out of the way, and then we'll go to Dave and let Brian go last and take as much time as he needs to hit his highlights for the episode in general. But my broad impressions of this one, it is very contrived at moments, and there's some murky details on things that I wish were explained more clearly. So, unfortunately, some standard Discovery problems, but overall, it was still an enjoyable episode for me. Kind of a cops show procedural story about officers from different agencies having to work together on a joint mission, and it was fun seeing the Co-op Malat again. I really liked them in Star Trek Picard. Good use of President Rillick as the politician, and kind of the good things and annoying things that come from her being this very politician-y politician. Good use of Admiral Vance, even though we didn't see a lot of him. What we did see was great. There was good use of President Terina, and fun seeing more of Navarre, like we were just talking about. And we actually beamed down to the planet this time instead of them beaming up to the ship. I really like seeing Burnham as captain. I think that works so well for the show. So I'm continuing to celebrate the fact that we have her in the captain's chair. I really like seeing Saru as the wise mentor. I think he fits that role like a hand in a glove. And I really like seeing Book and Stamets work together. Not sure what to make of what's going on with Tilly. I don't know what direction they're going with her or how that subplot's going to play out. And I'm not sure what the future of Gray and Adira is going to be now. I do have some ideas, I guess, but it was nice seeing them happy, though. I really liked that, and the social relevance of their story was so fantastically well done, and I'll explain more on that later because I have a lot of thoughts, and they're all very positive on that. I think that was probably the best thing the show's done in this episode, maybe in its history. And I dig the message of the episode, which was leaning into what might be uncomfortable or painful when you need to do it, and I thought that was handled well. Dave, what about you?
I think the message of the episode was you might have to kill a few people on the way to saving a species. And we should be prepared to look the other way when that happens. No, I like away mission episodes, and so this was, and I kind of like the unusual group we had in this with Burnham and her mom and Tilly as the kind of heading it up. I think I had some trouble with the motivation for Giovini. Is that how you say it?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. Which we can get into a little bit more into the weeds on that, I'm sure, when we get to those scenes. But it seemed a little dodgy that she would need to go quite as far as she did without potentially reaching out to someone for help or explaining the situation. Like, I didn't see quite why she wouldn't be able to necessarily. But I do like those kind of stories where people act very uncharacteristically and we eventually get an explanation. Data taking over the Enterprise, I've mentioned, I think, on some previous Tex-Treks, is a good example of that. I like the really strong, energetic opening with that poor bastard commander who was clearly ready to throw down at a moment's notice when the Kawat Malat start kicking ass on his ship. Much respect to him. Although maybe that was too aggressive. I don't know.
I liked him being scrappy.
Yeah, he was scrappy. That guy, he made the most of his 3 minutes of screen time. um, let's see. The sort of only complaints I might have would be, that, yeah, I think, like you said, Father, there's a little bit of prosaic, I guess, episode of the week things here, and though it did, connect up with the sort of the bigger plot too. I found myself this season maybe kind of noticing that there are times that at least my instinct from older Trek series is that the episodes are almost like run a little long. Like the about 10-minute denouement they sometimes do after the A plot ends sometimes feels a little draggy to me, and I kind of want like a quicker wrap up. That's mainly because I'm just used to it from Trek. I don't even know if I consider it an objective problem, but subjectively, I kind of notice it, and I always wish that when the A plot wrapped, they would kind of wrap the episode a little faster. Other than that, though, I had a solid good time. I liked it. What you got, Brian?
Let's see. This would not surprise me if this ends up being my favorite of the season. Obviously, there are more episodes that I've not seen, and they could end up surpassing this. But I like this a hell of a lot. This was like everything I like about Discovery. Going full in. They're pushing those Discovery buttons that I like, nice and hard. So we got all this great stuff that I really enjoyed, and a lot of just general stuff I like in Star Trek. We got some Vulcan stuff, and we got to see the Vulcans being intellectual badasses, which is something that's kind of been somewhat missing since the days of Spock. Really, is that the Vulcans just being able to be super, super smart about something, even if it is really, they just sit there and meditate and then they give cool answers. But there's this idea that, yeah, all these other smart people couldn't come up with anything. And these guys just sit here and think about it for an hour or two, and boom, they've got some answers. And I just like that. I liked getting to visit Vulcan, or Nivar, I guess that's what they call it.
Yeah, it's Navarre now. It's officially Navarre.
Yes, I should be using the name the planet wants to be known by. And we got, I don't know, I guess Romulan stuff. I'll say, for a lack of a better word, the alternate Vulcanoid culture with the Quelat Malat, which I love them, and I'm fascinated to see how they're kind of vaguely religious type, and not logical ideology. They find a job that's impossible that they know they're going to fail at, and then they embrace it. That is very much not logical. And how they kind of intersect with the more logical factions on Vulcan, and how they function here in the 31st century. So yeah, seeing more about that was a lot of fun. I think the Quelat Malat is probably my favorite aspect of Romulan culture at this point. And I would love to learn more. I thought it was beautifully written. Almost every line was either did exactly what it needed to do or was actually beautiful. There were very few points where I was like, oh, that's a bit of a clunker. I would have rephrased that slightly, or that line didn't need to be there. I really thought that they really nailed it on all those fronts. I thought the episode was kind of like what is an episode where context is king. It's about context. It's about it's not that they don't have the facts. they have all the they have the events down. They have a video recording of the Starfleet officer being killed. They know exactly who did it. They have all loads of data on the anomaly. There is a plethora of facts, of just raw data, but putting it all into context is where you unlock the true understanding and allows for wisdom to be deployed effectively in this story. And I think that's a fascinating idea, that it's one that goes to the heart of Star Trek about always asking questions, always make sure you have a bit of being skeptical and reconsidering your own actions and your own motivations, and thinking hard about other people's motivations. It's not a black and white universe, and they did that wonderfully here. They showed this is the sort of story that would be really weird if it was done in a Star Wars thing, but it is quintessentially Star Trek. I guess, like, we start out with a guy who is totally ignoring context. We have this Starfleet commander who is told over and over, listen, buddy, if you keep coming at me, I'm going to have to kill you. I need these rocks. I'm taking the rocks. I don't want to kill you. And the guy's like, no, space rocks are worth dying for. Even though we've got a whole planet of them, I need to make sure you don't get these space rocks. And he keeps going until he gets himself killed. And it's a great example of, say, the J.J. Abrams Captain Kirk gone awry. It feels like a scene that you could almost have dropped the J.J. Kirk into, and he would have won because he's the hero. But yeah, and I'm like, yeah, that guy gets himself killed. And yes, this person is running around, attacking people, hurting people, assaulting people. There's definitely, I'm not saying that the Quilat Malat Javir, was it?
Javini?
Was, huh? Javini was justified, but there were better ways to solve that problem than getting himself impaled on a sword. And he doesn't look at the context. He doesn't look at the big picture. They're just rocks, not worth dying for. Especially since we know they've got loads of these rocks. They've Starfleet. It's just a matter of how fast can we distribute the rocks to other people. That's the only problem. That's the sticking point, is that the nozzle for getting the dilithium out is limited by the small diminished nature of Starfleet, and Starfleet's trying to grow as fast as possible, but that's going to take time. They got to train people, or at least they've decided they've got to train people. So Book gets context to the death of his planet and the death of his family, the context that he was missing beforehand. And that context changes everything. Yes, he knew nothing. There was no factual data that was significant that he learned. In fact, they don't learn. They learned there was no blue glow from the tachyons. It's all about getting a deeper understanding of the context of those events that provides him with a small amount of peace and solace in this very, very difficult time. Michael Burnham gets a little schooling on context. She's all like, this guy killed a Starfleet officer. He's got to, I'm not sure, go to jail. I'm not even quite sure what she wants to happen to her. To
justice, Brian. She wants justice.
What does that mean when you're a Starfleet officer?
It was based on the trope of I think you said she's a cop killer. Yeah. Like she's a cop killer, and like the other cops' lives have a lot more value than an average life. And I'm a cop, and I got to go avenge my brother behind the thin blue light. Yeah, I was like, that was one of the things I liked least in the episode. It was kind of that cop show bullshit. But
I mean, there's
a reasonable question to be asked. She brought up the family of the dead person.
Yeah. No, I think they could have sold it a little better, but I'll get into that later.
Yeah.
But Brian, please continue.
Yeah, it felt to me like the sort of problem. I think But Michael was wrong, but it felt like the sort of wrongness that made sense with her character and her kind of go it alone, solve the problems myself. She's not doesn't like handing problems over to be solved by other people.
She's the responsibility hoarder.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so it felt very natural that she'd be saying, this was a crime on a Starfleet ship. And perhaps she's not even looking at the context about the dilithium stealing, the same way the commander wasn't when he got himself skewered. And the president kind of outlines a bigger context for all of this. And I mean, certainly I'd have questions, but they decide to trust the Navarre. And maybe that's the most important single thing that happened in this episode from a large scale macro level, is that the Navarre learned that the Federation is willing to trust them. Even though relations have been very, Navarre is not a member of the Federation. There is definitely some friction and some slowly building bridges here that were knocked down many years, centuries, whatever it was ago.
Within the last 125 years, I think.
Yeah. So, and again, I mean, the president manages to kind of say the awkward thing we don't really want to hear, but also manages to kind of be a little right, which is definitely the most interesting place to stick the president of the Federation, is to mash them into those awkward places where they have to kind of smooth over rough decisions that are not going to go down well and not going to please everyone. Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you, Audrey. E2, I guess is what you're going by. So yeah, I like that. I love the fact that when we visit the ship and it's the alien ship, and they play a little bit of music that was really riffing on Alien, and that was a nice touch there.
That Jerry, is it Jerry Goldsmith who did the Alien music?
I believe
he
right.
did Alien, and then James Horner did Aliens.
Right.
Both Star Trek guys.
Yeah. So, and so they set you up for, again, this looks like, this is going to be bad. It has all the hallmarks of of a franchise we're very familiar with. But of course, this is Star Trek. And once we learn the context, it changes everything we feel about that inside of that ship and about those aliens. It's the most blunt and obvious of the context things, but it's also, right there in Star Trek's wheelhouse is the story we like to tell. And we switch things around by making it the antagonists who have the clearer picture of things, albeit because they aren't being very communicative. Let's see. I really enjoyed this episode. I loved all the stuff with Adira and Gray and Hugh. That was all wonderful. I love the Stamets and the idea that Stamets and Book are continuing to kind of be a duo, and interact with each other. I wasn't clear, and maybe I just missed the line. Where is the symbiont at the end of this episode?
I think we can safely assume still within Adira, because in the previous episode, Gray said, I can continue to learn to be a guardian, or I can become a host again, and all this different stuff.
All right.
So it sounds like she might have the option of becoming a host to a different symbiont.
Okay. So is there still a copy of Gray inside what's the name of the symbiote? This particular
Tall.
Tall. Is there still a copy of Gray's memory inside Tall?
There is not, because we know how this procedure works from Deep Space Nine, the episode Facets, when Jadzia Dax was putting her past hosts into other people on the ship. When they would transfer out, she no longer had those memories. Like when Curzon went into Odo, she had no Curzon memories. It was all gone.
Okay. And I guess they're fine with this. The Trill used to be very protective about the memories, the whole point of this is to stuff as many memories and experience onto the symbiont as possible. And here they're participating in an operation to actually remove memories and experience from the symbiont, which I was like, is that what they're doing? I guess. And it's been a few hundred years. Things could have changed, but it is surprising that it's kind of, it's kind of like going to Vulcan and finding a bunch of people investing in lost causes. It's what? So, okay. So yeah, I was a little uncertain about that. I kind of felt that that it was slightly passive and that we just sit around until Gray wakes up. And I was like, it would have been, I don't know, perhaps slightly more interesting if that plot line had something else to it besides we just wait and the problem goes away. But
well, Adira had to reach out. Gray felt Adira reaching out, and so that's what woke him up.
All right, so I guess there was again, I did not
but
get a
still
chance
it wasn't much it didn't take much effort to solve that problem.
Yeah. But I did love all the great angsty stuff going on. So that was good. What they probably should have done is had Adira keep coming up with harebrained technobabble to fix it. And Hugh keeps saying, no, don't fix it. Just stand back and let it fix itself. And Adira has to learn that, patience and stuff. That might have, and you could have still stuck all the angsty stuff as motivation for why Adira wants to do technobabble plan C and D and E and Culber's like, yeah, whoa, hold your horses. Just give it a chance to work. So that might have made that a little sharper, I think. But it was still good. I love those characters. I love them interacting. I kind of wish Stamets had been there for some of it, but Stamets had to go do science and grief counseling with the Vulcans and book. I liked generally. Oh, sorry, I generally liked the Tilly stuff, and I did like how we again. Saru has this big faith that Tilly is the ultimate ambassadorial aide and that, perfect for, tricky diplomatic situations. Just drop a little Tilly on top of that, which is, very counterintuitive from a traditional pattern thought processes. But I think the actress and the writing sells us that she is actually an asset to have along.
And Discovery kind of goes its own way too in the halls of Trek. It's even with all the Trek's Mavericks, sometimes Discovery does things a little differently.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if there's much more I have to say, at least in the broad levels. It was a delightful episode, charming. I will probably rewatch it again, even though I don't need to rewatch it to get ready for this podcast, because I really do want to see it again and enjoy some of its nuances. So yeah, great fun, great example of what I come here for, or come to Discovery hoping to see. Did this writer write other episodes? I'm curious if there's any pattern between this writer and other episodes I might have liked or disliked.
This was their first Star Trek writing credit, I believe. And the director, Christopher J. Byrne, I think directed the season 1 episode Into the Forest I Go. That was the mid-season finale where they blow up Kenneth Mitchell and go into the mirror universe.
All right. Yeah.
I don't think they've directed anything since then, though. And this was the first episode written by Terri Hughes Burton.
Well, I hope they get Terri back again, because I quite enjoyed this.
I might be wrong on that, but that's if memory serves, to quote another Star Trek episode title.
So yeah, that's my piece.
Cool. Well, Dave and I are going to go ahead and engage into the episode breakdown. Brian,
All right.
you can stay or go.
I should probably get going. I've got a goddamn nerds meeting starting shortly. So
That's what they
finally,
call themselves, the goddamn nerds.
He's not just making a sudden
Yeah.
evaluation.
yeah. No, that's literally GDN is. But yes, we're having our first in-person meeting since the day the COVID thing blew up. So it's kind of a special night.
Well, we wish you well.
Yep.
Yeah, have a lot
all
of
right.
fun with that.
Yes, well, I will definitely be tuning in, watching this YouTube video and seeing what else you guys talked about, and I will catch up with you guys, the rest of you, all later. So, peace. Oh, they said peace and long life instead of live long and prosper. I was glad to see somebody still remembers that's a thing Vulcans say. So, peace and long life, y'all.
Jolon True. Okay, well, Dave, let's just go ahead and get started at the
Sure.
beginning of the episode. Me and Dave are going to break this thing down beat by beat. We'll just kind of alternate explaining each segment of the episode, and then we'll talk about it in great detail. But things start off with the opening, where we do see the rogue Co-op Malat Javini, the murder nun turned dilithium bandit, striking a Federation ship. She kills a Starfleet commander and jacks their dilithium. And then at Starfleet / Federation headquarters, President Relic and Terina, or both presidents, meet with Admiral Vance and Captain Burnham to discuss their plan of action and what they're going to do to stop Javini. So, Dave, what do you think about this opening?
Was it literally? Well, first of all, I dug seeing that ship. What was the ship that they were on?
Oh, the Credence.
Credence. That was named after Creedence Clearwater Revival, I assume.
Sure.
Good to see that Swamp Rock has survived to the 32nd century.
You know what? I really liked seeing the exterior of it. I thought it was a great looking ship.
I agree.
And then I was sad when I saw the interior, and I was like, oh, the insides look like Discovery. Why does this 32nd century have a 23rd century interior? I wish they had used... I know that they're just using their established sets, but I wish that they used like some of their headquarter sets, like redress Admiral Vance's office or something, to give it more of that 32nd century look. But
Yeah,
I actually
yeah.
think there's an explanation for this. I'll get into maybe in our Gorn Eggs segment, but...
Those kind of details usually just float right past me because I don't pay as much attention to the ship design and stuff like that as y'all do.
Yeah, it'd be like
so
if
that
you
one,
saw a modern aircraft carrier, and then like you go
And it had
under
World War
the
II
inside.
interiors.
No, it'd be like if it had like a medieval Viking interior.
Yeah, I guess the dates are now slipping quite a bit. But anyway, yeah. That said, I thought it was like this is how you do like a really energetic opening. What I liked is that obviously the point. Well, I guess there were 2 points here. They wanted to show how Javini, is that how what we're running with? How dangerous and quick acting she was. But I appreciated that they made a point of this guy's sort of his sheer skill and ability to fight. I think it'll be interesting to we'll have to discuss a little bit more. Maybe, I guess we can discuss it right now as to whether it was smart at all of him, or whether he should have done like retailers or places where they get robbed and they're supposed to just be like take it.
I mean, I thought Commander Fickett, what was his name? I thought he was kind of a badass, so I'm not going to complain about his actions just because I enjoyed it so much.
Yeah.
I actually do think this is one of the contrivances that I mentioned. There's a few things that just feel forced in this episode. And like this is one of them. I don't buy that like she had to use lethal force. And the idea that like the co-op Malat like must use swords, it seems a little silly to me. It's like, hey, if you had phasers and you could just like stun this dude, it would have worked out better for everyone. Like you wouldn't be a fugitive wanted for murder. This dude would be able to go home to his family. But
religious orders sometimes have some odd precepts. I sort of get it. Worf had all of his, the traditions that seem to hurt him as much as help him at any given time. So I kind of buy it, but yeah, you're like, does that mean that they cannot try to stop somebody from dying is, Brian pointed out that they were like, hey, choose to live, and he didn't. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, when somebody walks into your house and like tells you choose to live by not opposing me as I steal your stuff, it's not really a cool bargain. Like, you're really, it's not too cool.
And she does say sorry at the end, so I guess that makes it a little better. But I didn't know what he was trying to attack her with, by the way, when she knocks the phaser out of his hand.
Yeah, I was like,
he
was there a
grabs
space?
something.
I thought it was like a poker from the futuristic fireplace.
Is it like a Starfleet issue fighting stick? Like, I guess it was just like a tool or a piece of equipment or something. But I was really curious.
I think it must have been a tool. It's some kind of big space wrench. But anyway, at the very least, super well filmed scene, very nicely fast edited, and sold the immediate threat. So good job on the opening scene.
Yeah, and it caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting there to be a Kowat Malat evildoer, or well, we can debate how evil she is, but someone like literally committing murder against Federation people, against Starfleet officers. And
Yep.
And this is when we get into like that cop show procedural stuff, which I don't mind really. I think there's a lot of like fun storytelling stuff that you can take out of that, and I actually prefer to see those tropes used in different genres because I just don't do cop shows. I think that's a genre that should go extinct. But yeah, like I liked the, they're basically like meeting at like the police station, and like the commissioner or the captain or whatever is like, okay, you and you are going to have to work together and you're going to have to go on the mission. Here's the perp. We have like their rap sheet. Here's all the exposition for the audience. Now, and go get them, Tiger.
I sort of appreciated the brevity of that, which does come from being familiar with those tropes.
Yeah. Writers know how to write these, and audiences know how to interpret them.
Oh, it's interesting to me. It feels like the Federation feels so, in some ways, very small right now, where essentially you've got the president of the Federation and Admiral Vance, the basically head of Starfleet. Is that how we'd put it? Fairly regularly interacting with the Discovery as if they were, like the police captain and maybe the mayor or something like that.
Yeah, because you have the politician. Yeah.
I've got the mayor busting my ass to get this Kowat Malat rounded up before the next election.
Yeah,
I mean, that is kind of the vibe of it.
For sure. And they did establish in season 3 that Federation and Starfleet are kind of folded into one thing. So that's they're all under one roof. Yeah, they are small, and they remind us that they're
right. In
they're
particular, post Byrne, that is the nature of things. Which, by the way, speaking of post Byrne, if we do think that guy in the beginning, the commander who got killed, that he was a little overzealous and maybe he should have been saying, "Stop! What are you doing? We want to talk to you." Like in between trading blows, he could have gotten a little bit of information out like that. But keeping in mind that this is a post-Byrne world that had fallen into a lot of sort of savagery throughout the galaxy. And, I'm sure they were used to... He may have had to deal with raiders and all kinds of other stuff
with ninjas just beaming in like that.
Yeah, I would be inclined to slap the ninja down. I get it, bro. So, yeah.
Well, what I liked here is that it was actually President Rillick's idea. Like, Michael, you and your mom should work together. It was like her idea to make it a joint mission because the Kowat Malat want to go after Javini. Michael wants to go after Javini. And then she does the politician thing where she waits for everyone to leave, and then she goes to Michael when it's just the two of them, and she's like, all right, now I'm going to tell you what's up. You need to go flex some Federation strength. Make sure that you capture the perp. You have to do this by any means necessary.
Right, like they're paying lip service to the Navarre culture, but they are like, we have to make a show.
Yeah, we can't look this weak that you can just kill an officer on our ship and get away with it. But yeah, she wants to stay on good terms with, she's being the politician. She wants to stay on good terms with Navarre. And I thought it was also interesting that both these presidents want the unification of Navarre and the Federation. We had the unification of the Vulcans and Romulans. Now we have to unite them back into the Federation. So they both want that. Tarina said that she wanted that. Relic says she wants that. And so, yeah, they're both kind of have an incentive to stay on each other's good side.
The I was thinking also about the dilithium thing, and maybe we'll talk about this more near the end as things are resolving. But one thing I wish they would show was that I know that they essentially have a planet of dilithium, right?
Right.
And so that puts them back into the post scarcity place of the 24th century and 23rd, I guess, in Star Trek. But I kind of want a little bit more of that hard ass Deep Space Nine thing where we, maybe it's there's like so much demand that it's still something that yes, they can hand it out, but they have to be cautious about it. They have to think about it. If they they might lose certain Starfleet functions if they give away too much of it. They may not be able to be as effective overall. I wish we would. I kind of want to see that the price of their benevolence a little bit. That they have to pay a price
when they were writing these episodes in late 2020. And then when they were shooting this in early 2021, it was around the time of like, oh, the vaccines are coming, and now we have to deal with vaccine distribution. And so I think that might be kind of the that's what dilithium is kind of representing is the pandemic solution.
I get that. I think I like it where it's more like traditionally like oil, and it's scarce enough that there's sort of always going to be, it cannot be as easily distributed to billions as say or it's harder to do that. Nations would be more cautious about it than they would be with the vaccine. But anyway, it's we'll see more of that as the season plays out, which I kind of need to see how they do it.
Jill in the comments, or Audrey too, the swamp kelp bloom, she's going by this week, says that Tarina for Federation president, vote. And yeah, I kind of like Tarina more than Relic, so I'd probably vote for Michael. Damn sure would vote for her if they maybe do that in season 5. They have an election year or something.
Do you think there's going to be any reveals, any duplicity, about Tarina or any of the or Relic?
I don't know. I haven't gotten any signs of like Tarina that might be
it's more like the traditional trope anything, of any given sort of genre fiction to kind of reveal somebody who seemed rather altruistic to have ulterior motives. We already know Rillick has some ulterior motives, but isn't too bad. I haven't seen anything in particular from Tarina either.
I haven't really thought about that, but I kind of like the idea of Navarre being friends more than I think them like turning out to be enemies or something. I think there's more storytelling potential of like, oh, let's. Well,
there's such a long tradition of Vulcan, of course, being the core Federation ally. Not so much with the Romulans, though.
Yeah, but that would make it different. That would make doing stuff with the Vulcanoids on Discovery is going to be a little bit different than in past shows. And we do see some of the differences. We see kind of like the fusion of those two cultures. I'll try to remember to point those out. Dave, do you want to tell us about the beginning of their mission, their quest to go get Javini?
So Tilly ends up talking to Saru about her effort to try new things outside of her comfort zone. Saru makes the case to Captain Burnham that taking Tilly on the mission to apprehend Javini would be helpful to the mission and good for Tilly. So then both the Burnham ladies, mom and daughter, and Tilly and the Kawat Malat, equivalent of a red shirt, take books shipped to the location of the stolen dilithium. It's all swords and no phasers for this mission.
And that's another one of the contrivances I had when Mama Burnham says, oh, we got to respect the Kawat Malat ways. You can't bring phasers. I thought that was kind of lame. I would have straight up told her, like, no, I don't care. It's a joint mission, and you got to respect Starfleet ways. I'm bringing a phaser. I'll respect your right to not bring one, but you got to respect my right to bring one.
Well, I think she could have said, like, or at least I would have liked to have heard her say maybe, "Hey, the whole triggering incident for this was those swords killed one of our people.
Yeah.
So how about some maybe non-lethal phasers, you dumbass?"
I mean, it would solve a lot of problems. I wish that they maybe had just been like, oh, like on this moon we go to, we're not going to be able to use phasers because there's explosive rocks or there's some energy field that's interfering with all the phasers, or
A
something
classic,
like that.
more classic Trek
Yeah.
contrivance.
And
Well,
it kind of violates the idea of absolute candor to be like, okay, we're not going to tell you all the truth of this until we're like halfway there. We're in the ship halfway
Right.
there. So
right, yeah, that's
bothered
a
me.
good point there. When they get attacked by the Kuat Malat, and Red Shirt gets killed, Tilly, who they emphasize has no serious combat training, not on the level of Burnham and her mom. She could have died there.
Yeah.
It was in some ways just lucky she didn't, and we probably would feel quite a bit less forgiving of Javini's actions if Tilly had died, because of their dumb swords rule.
I'm glad you brought up Tilly. Let's talk about Tilly for a little bit, because the idea of Saru, talking Burnham into bringing Tilly along, saying like, yes, she doesn't seem like an obvious choice, but it'd be good for her to try something outside of her comfort zone, and
Let's go on this deadly mission.
But first of all, like, you're in Starfleet, so it is part of the job. I mean, she was a veteran of the Klingon
Sure.
War in season 1.
Yep.
But even though we don't really think of her as a military type person, she kind of is. But in addition to that, I think Doug Jones sold it so well in his performance of Saru talking to Burnham that it kind of convinced me. It's like, I kind of buy it. But, it's not really that big of a stretch. And compared to like some of the other things in this episode that I think are much more unnaturally forced, this doesn't really seem like that big of a deal. So I don't have too much of a problem with it. But I kind of would have... I don't know, I kind of would like to have seen Reese, the tactical officer, go do something, because we haven't seen him do anything other than sit in the captain's chair for 30 seconds. It would have been kind of cool if they could have brought him too, but I get it. They want to focus on these other more important characters.
I liked seeing Tilly, and so yes, the effect of it, which I understand sometimes they're not following very accurate, realistic procedures, even within their fantasy confines. They do what the plot needs, or spotlight what character they want to spotlight.
They did give an explanation of like, well, Tilly might be good for diplomatic stuff, and I could see you kind of arguing that one either way. Be like, oh no,
Sure.
like she's so like weird and awkward and not a very elegant speaker, and we should never bring her anything diplomatic. But she has shown, I'm thinking more of like early season 1 stuff, the scene like when she's talking to Michael about, I love feeling feelings, and when she was like showing like concern for Michael's well-being, and she does have a empathetic side. That
Right.
I mentioned it last week, but I messed up. I called her empathic, and I should have said empathetic, because those are two different things. And
Sure.
she does have that empathetic side, and so that's why I was able to buy Saru making that case.
I think it was PJ, some comments back, who likened her to Barkley, but I think like she has her particular brand of awkwardness, sort of unlike Barkley's, seems to put people at ease a little bit. Like they see her being awkward, and I think they want to give her a hug. And I think with Barkley, they wanted to give him a slap.
Sure, yeah. I know personally, I would definitely prefer to hug Tilly and slap Barkley.
Is this the marry, screw, kill game? No, let's not go
hug,
there.
Slap, or stab with a sword.
Hug, slap, or disruptor. What was it? He said Saru said in the last season, "You're a good first impression." It's arguably, would that work in the real world? Somebody who kind of, gets awkward among the diplomats, maybe not so much. But I like the idea that in the 32nd century or in the 24th century, that there was sort of an openness to maybe folks who are maybe not neurotypical, but also that awkwardness is not seen as such a debilitating thing. That sometimes that's just how people are. So I like that. I thought it was cool I like Saru continuing to play a role. And I was trying to think. I don't think he actually has. I mean, like of all the various first officers, is there anybody quite like him as far as like having a sort of fatherly kind of vibe? The closest I could sort of think of, just real casually, was Spock, who could, had Saru has something of Spock to him.
I don't think Spock
But
ever came off as a father to like Uhura or
right.
Sulu or Chekhov or Scotty.
Yeah.
So
Saru is he's warm, and Spock was very often distinctly cold, except when he would sometimes offer a logical assessment that was surprisingly comforting sometimes. But I like that it's rare to, I think, have a first officer who feels like the elder statesman in the way that he does,
it's
and
it's not
I
what
really
I would
like
have
that.
expected for the character, but like I said earlier,
It's like he grew
it
kind
fits.
of. Yeah, it feels like he grew very rapidly
Yeah.
over like seasons 2 through 4.
Yeah, and I would even argue that like maybe his status here in season 4, maybe it is one of the contrivances I should point out, but I like it.
Yeah,
I don't want to complain about it. It might have felt a little unnatural getting here, but I'm enjoying it so much that oh no, maybe they should have been doing this with Doug Jones all along.
yeah, that's true.
Just like I love Burnham and the captain's chair. For whatever reason, I think that makes the show work so much better. It just seems
Well, they kind of had always had her, she was always sort of, or often in charge of her team,
she was always the focus.
always the focus, and so it's actually a fairly natural evolution.
Agreed.
I also, by the way, this was a small thing, but I liked Tilly. This was, kind of getting her connection with the Coat Malat, where she was like, "Oh, absolute candor. I kind of dig that."
Oh yeah, when she has the moment to talk to Red Shirt, what's her name?
Yeah.
So that we can kind of care about this character when they die for no reason later.
But also that, what did Tilly say? She told her in her absolute candor, that, what was it? You're worried that your awkwardness will be off-putting to me, and she's like, it's not, or something like that.
Her enthusiasm. She was excited. She was like, "Oh, I never go on missions like this," and
Yeah.
this is exciting. And then she's like, "Oh, not that like I'm enthused about having to like arrest your friend, your sister in the Co-op Malat."
Yeah.
And then the other nun who I didn't like her weird ears. I guess she must be mixed with like some other alien race in the future, or this is just some form of Romulan or Vulcan that we've never seen before. But there's like these weird little like they look more alien. The ears, they have like these weird little things near the points.
She's just a little bit of variation. It's been 1,000 years. Maybe it's even it could be a style thing, like a chosen little surgery or something like that. Who knows?
But the other thing about Tilly's status for this season, where she's uncertain what she's doing with her life, and I think a lot of people go through that, like at her age. She's supposed to be like 25 now, right? Because she was a senior at the academy in season 1. She was a 4th year cadet, so she'd be about 25 now, and
okay.
I see like a lot of people like go through this where maybe like they get out of college and they get like their first quote unquote adult job. For me, like I kind of went through something like this when I was 19 and started working at the plant that I worked at out of high school. But it's kind of like, oh, like, is this just my life now? Like, this is it? Like, there's no more meaning to anything. Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Kind of like this. You're not fulfilling the sense of purpose that you expected when you were younger. And it would actually make a lot of sense for her. This first season we had the Klingon War. Second season they were busy with the Red Angel stuff, and then stopping control. Third season they were running around trying to do something with the Byrne. Here we've just had kind of like 5 months of stability.
Yeah, do you think it's like the first time she's been able to like sort of sit with her thoughts and think, oh, what am I doing? Am I liking this? Or previously she's just been always essentially focused on the mission to some degree.
Right. This is the first time it's just be like, oh, so this is just like the day in and day out of my life now. So I don't know if she's going to leave Starfleet, if she's going to like leave the science division and go into something else.
Some notable change seems to be coming up. It felt like it was kind of jumped out a little bit this episode and almost seemed like a different issue than the previous episode when she was talking to Culber, or or maybe 2 episodes back. I can't remember,
It
but
was one episode ago.
I guess it was just like uh, her sudden the very specific thing of trying out new experiences and all that seemed like just a sudden swerve a little bit, like from her particular issue. I wasn't even quite sure if she knew what her problem was when she came to Colbert, but just that something was off. And certainly jumping into the 32nd century might do that to anyone. But although I'm interested to see what happened to her, I sort of felt like it just suddenly came about.
Yeah, I guess it was supposed to be triggered by, well, two things. In the first episode of the season, when she sees the cadets, the new cadets at Starfleet Academy, and she's like, "Oh, those cadets know exactly what they're doing, and they have their sense of purpose." I had that when I was their age, but I guess I don't have it anymore. And then also when she went through all the trauma on that space station and saw Commander Nahlas die, and that kind of freaked her out a little bit.
Yeah,
Which is probably realistic.
And he did die
seems kind
with
of small. It seems like a small event in the grand scheme of the show, but
somebody dying in front of her and somebody dying with regrets, like, oh, he he didn't get to make it back home. He didn't seem to be loving what he was doing.
Yeah, no, it's actually fairly realistic. And it was kind of cute when she got the sword and she was like, "Oh, this is so outside my comfort zone," like her like celebration of it. And that is a good. I actually think that's just kind of a good thing to do in general. I often need to be pushed to get out of my comfort zones, but I frequently find it rewarding. Try food you don't like.
Yeah, but she dropped the sword on the floor.
Well, yeah, because she moisturized her hands, and apparently they don't have like a future alternative. This is a weird thing about me, but I hate lotion. I can't stand it being on my skin. I hate like that greasiness that doesn't go away. And
How
I would hope that.
How do you feel about like soaps, like liquid soap?
But you just like wash that off with water and then rub it off with a towel, and it's fine.
I was just curious if it was the consistency. Carry on.
But I would just hope that like in the future, in the 32nd century, there would be like an alternative to that. But
Tilly is always seems to be a little scattered. I can imagine she might be like, oh, I'm trying out some alien lotion. I'm trying some some other thing, or yes, it will dry, but I forgot to activate the thing that does that. I don't know.
Or she was just just grasping for an excuse.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'm surprised that a 32nd century man would know what like wash and wax the spaceship, like what that would mean. But,
sometimes I have to imagine they're using whatever their present day idiom is, and just for we the audience are hearing something that we would understand it. So because we're not going to know whatever 32nd century thing, we don't know the memes of the 32nd century.
Well, let's talk about their arrival on this inhospitable moon that they get to, where they track the dilithium with the dilithium tracker. But Javini and her mercenaries attack Book's ship. They kill what's-her-name, who cares? And then Javini warns the rest of the heroes not to beam down to the interior of the moon. But Sarek and Amanda didn't raise no quitter, so Michael leads her mom and Tilly into the moon. They find one dead alien and a bunch of sleeping ones. It turns out this entire moon is a giant sleeper ship, and Javini has reactivated its engines with the stolen dilithium. And the Burnham ladies have Tilly reactivate the engines, and then they tell her, stand around, we can use you as bait, draw Javini out, and then grab her. So what do you think of the moon, the reveal, all of that stuff?
Is Saru's adopted sort of kid, is that Sukal?
Yeah.
How you? It looked a little bit too much like Sukal's weird dream world of darkness.
Oh, I think I was thinking of that subconsciously, actually, now that you say that, because that's I think I thought of that when I was watching this.
Yeah, I don't know if they've used that kind of those sort of dark visuals a few times on here, and maybe they're all sort of blurring a little bit for me. But it looked a little weirdly. It felt a little Discovery tropey. obviously good special effects. There was a good sense of distance and spatial quality in there, but it didn't feel like I kind of didn't feel like it had a whole lot new to bring until the lights and power basically came on near the end, and it looked very cool. Obviously, they didn't want that to happen before, and they didn't want it to be apparent it was was it a moon they had turned into a spaceship? It wasn't just
Yeah.
a big spaceship, right?
Yeah,
They had
they
found
learn
some.
they learn from those cave drawings or hieroglyphics or whatever, however you want to describe them. But it conveniently explained the story, which makes sense. If you're aliens and you go into space, you would want like pictures so that if aliens find you and they come onto your moon ship, they'll be able to see this and understand what happened without having to know your language or anything. So it kind of makes sense. When we send the Voyager probes, Star Trek the Motion Picture, but when we send that shit into space, we put like pictures, drawings on there. I don't know if anyone will ever see it, but in this case, Michael looks at the stuff and she's like, "Oh, their sun went nova, so in order to escape, they had everyone go onto their planet's moon, and they turned their moon into a warp ship and came to their new planet, and they were supposed to wake up."
It might have been nice to throw a little bit of explanation out there of like how they did that, like the immense power that would be needed to warp a whole moon. Would be interesting to it's interesting that they would be using sort of hieroglyphs and yet also have that level of technology, which seems
Well,
actually far
you would
beyond.
you'd use the pictures like no matter what, because
I guess so.
for what I was saying, if people were gonna like beam aboard and maybe not be familiar with your language.
Right, but it also could just be a cultural or value of theirs, or have some religious significance for them, or who knows.
But I kind of expect stuff like this in the 32nd century, so I was okay with it not being explained.
I kind of wanted, I guess, at least one person to say, "Wow, they can move a whole moon," and just be like impressed by it, maybe.
What
you
about
know?
Gabrielle's reaction when she says, "It's no moon, it's a ship"? It was very like Death Star esque. The delivery
It's
of
weird.
that.
I don't
but-
think I thought that as I was watching it. I don't know why I wouldn't, but I don't think it popped into my head, that particular obvious correlation.
My other issue here is that when the ninjas beam onto the ship, if they would have been able to stun them, things would have worked out better. This person wouldn't have died. And then, when Giovanni came on, maybe they would have a shot at stunning her. I mean, she's probably a little too slick for that, but I just feel like there's not a lot of negative consequence from just using the phasers anyways.
if it was like so vital to this, by the way, the Koat Malat were a persecuted minority in the Romulan Empire, right?
We
That's
don't
they
know
definitely.
that. They
I
were
thought they
enemies
said
of the
they
Tal
were-
Shiar.
Okay, yeah, and the Tal Shiar kind of weren't they kind of running the show?
The Tal Shiar was basically like the Romulan CIA, so they definitely had like a lot of sway and a lot of authority. So either the Koat Malat were, they were persecuted, or at least they were like a secret underground group or something like that, or there was some type of checks and balances within Romulan society that was able to maintain the Koat Malat and the Tal Shiar. That has not been explained or addressed.
But assuming that they play a larger cultural, more accepted cultural role for the Navarre now, and that let's say the swords are it's just a really important ceremonial thing for them.
Well, that's
and-
illogical. So Vulcans
Yeah,
should have,
but they're not just Vulcans now, right? They're Romulans too, right?
yeah. But
So
there should be enough Vulcan in there to.
I tend to agree, but those Romulan passions. But here's the question: is like, is the loss of those people? This is the big moral dilemma of it. If you were to dive into it, is it worth the loss of a few people to bring the Navarre on into the Federation again, and make potentially make things better for tens of millions, or billions of people? I wouldn't want to be the person who has to die for that, But there's a case to be made that you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs.
I wasn't convinced that was necessary though. I mean, yeah, she only kills
Right.
2 people.
That's why I brought up the notion of like, well, if the co-op Malat were a much bigger thing now, and like a lot of people would be pissed off if they found out that the Federation had gone in with their nasty ass phasers. Like, I think you're right though. They needed to, if that was the case, they needed to be like, oh man, yeah, people would freak their shit.
If you can't get over that, I wouldn't want you in the Federation.
Right. But
Sorry.
you say that, but we know that Vulcan has so much to offer.
Yeah. We need their sweet science. Like we got to stay on their good side.
We need their meditation, floating science meditation platforms.
Yeah, but it's just more of those contrivances that I said bug me. But it is kind of a typical thing with Discovery. Overall, though, I still like season 4 a lot. 3 episodes in, I think I'm liking it more than 3 episodes into any of the existing seasons, and I have never truly disliked the show. So that's a good sign. Also, the Burnham ladies fighting each other when Tilly tries to be the peacemaker. I was like, oh yeah, that's that stuff that like Saru was talking about. How like she's good with the touchy feely stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she seems to have an instinct for it.
Like, me and my mom hated each other, but if she was here right now, I'd give her a big hug. And it's like, it reminds us, oh yeah, Michael's the only person out of this entire ship who can actually hang out with one of her family members.
Though, I do miss a little bit of the Michelle Yeoh meanness, because, what was her character? I got
Philippa Giorgio?
Yeah, I kind of want Mira Giorgio to be like Tilly to say something like that, and her to be like, "Oh, shut up! Take that childish trash out of here. The grown-ups are talking." Just every once in a while, like that she brought something to the thing she brought to Discovery was a little bit of that harsh slap in the face, cold water in the face.
Yeah, they kind of need someone
because,
like
because
like
Discovery
is
a pretty touchy-feely place, which I largely like. But it almost does need a voice of like, tough love, I guess.
Yeah.
Or
like
not
Spike was in Buffy.
Yeah.
You need someone who's just gonna be a dick.
Yeah, it's kind of true. Let's see. What did they ended up using her as bait, right?
Yeah, and I don't have anything else to say until we get into like the resolution of all the moon stuff. So if you don't have anything else, we can go ahead and move into that.
Sure. Let's go ahead and get to that point. So Giovini shows up and has a quick sword fight with Mama Burnham. She takes Gabrielle hostage and demands Tilly reactivate the engines. We get some backstory on what exactly happened and why she took up the lost cause of protecting the sleepers. Burnham concludes that the aliens should have woke and something must be broken on their moon ship. She fixes whatever was wrong. The aliens are able to move into their new home, and Giovini turns herself in.
Again, this was another contrivance for me. I'm not beating up on the episode too much. I did have a good time watching it, so I don't want to sound overly harsh, but the fact that Burnham just instantly is like, well, hey, they should wake up. We've reached their planet. Why don't I just fix this real quick in about 2 minutes? It's really easy, and then problem solved. It's like, is Giovini dumb? Did she just not think of that? Like, it's it just feels like a little forced to. Oh, they wanted to tell the story of like the rogue Hawat Malat stealing dilithium, and also like the fact that she was so protective of them. Like, she wouldn't go tell her other sisters. She wouldn't go tell the Federation the truth and get the dilithium. She could have, like, told the location of this planet to them, and Starfleet probably would have been like, not only will we bring the dilithium, we'll help protect this planet so that there's no more grave robbers coming to take their
Yeah. I think
Latinum
she could have
blood.
released some portion of the information without, like, saying, oh, this is where they are, and here's the coordinates and all of this, but say, like, brought to her, I don't know if Co-op Malat have superiors or what their hierarchy is, but take it to them, take it to somebody and say, hey, can we do anything with this? And then if they say no, then she goes all rogue like she did. But, like, I don't quite know why they would say no. Maybe when I know resources have only, has she been doing this since before the Byrne was solved essentially last season?
No, because they weren't distributing dilithium then.
Mm.
And she's only getting the dilithium because that anomaly, because they got to tie it to their season-long arc. And she's scared the anomaly might come towards this planet, so she wants the dilithium to be able to move the moon out of the system if need be.
Yeah, that was the part that was, I think, maybe most dodgy to me. I'm like, I don't know how close they were supposed to be to where we were last week. I don't know if this anomaly could literally go anywhere. Like, could it show up at, like, Federation or, like, Starfleet headquarters and just, like, wipe out all of Starfleet
Yeah,
headquarters?
I think that's supposed to be the conclusion that we draw after the last episode, is that the anomaly can go, it's totally unpredictable and it can go anywhere.
Yeah. Which I guess if that's the case, I'd kind of like to see a little bit more of a existential crisis among Starfleet. Like, hey, what are we going to do if that does happen?
Yeah.
But it felt like it felt like a bit of a contrivance, and I didn't quite buy that she had to be as secretive and murdery as she was to get these people to safety. I know that she like. Maybe she's like Burnham, bad at delegating authority.
I did absolutely love, and I laughed out loud, the moment when Giovanni shows up and Tilly immediately throws her hands up and says, "I choose to live. I 100% choose to live." 'Cause that's exactly what I would say to a co-op Malat. Like,
Yeah, and it's a perfect Tilly too. It was just like
Yeah.
a great scene for her. I jotted that down too in my notes. I really liked it.
what do you think of the alien design when we see like how it's a very alien?
I wish we'd seen more of them. I thought they looked cool. I loved the sort of sideways eyelid. They kind of conveyed some character without you having to see too much of them.
Yeah.
I mean, that said, for all I know, these people could be a fascist conqueror race who just were in a bad jam.
The Abronians.
Yeah,
They look so weird. Like, the reason why we don't see much of them is because they look so weird. It's like we could make it look really weird and really cool the less we see of it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
But
no,
it-
there's
for me, it
something
worked.
to that. I guess I thought that by the end, when they were showing their ships moving down to the planet, it might have been nice to go ahead and let the effects guys, I'm sure, had all of the design work done on these guys, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe there's stuff that didn't have, textures and renderings and
you
all of
wanted
that.
to like talk to them though.
Not even that. If I had just seen like some of them like through like essentially the equivalent of a cockpit or a bridge window or whatever.
Yeah, or like they're
peacefully-
waking up from their cryopod. You see like a little baby one like go over to its mom and like they hug each other, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure why they wouldn't do it if they had rendered them, and maybe that's the deal, is that they were mostly in shadows and they just weren't fully all rendered and designed.
But I loved the visual storytelling and the imagery of Giovanni taking off her co-op Malat robe and putting it over the dead body of the dying alien, Taglanen, I think was his name, or Taglanen, something like that. But
Yeah.
when she does that, it's basically not only her saying like, I've answered your call. I'm here to honor your request that you've made. I will protect your people. But it's also her like going rogue and being like, okay, like I don't get to wear the co-op Malat robe right now.
Did they say whether she had specifically broken from them?
They don't say that, but I mean, like, she's clearly not working in tandem with them.
For sure. Yeah, no, I like that. They what happened? They were attacked by who attacked them?
Just grave robbers trying to get the latinum in their blood.
Right. Yeah, I guess I thought that was like more might have been maybe needed to be made of that like, oh, well, Latinum still had such a high value that, oh, even the slightest link, the pirates have ears everywhere. That's why we couldn't go to Starfleet. That's why we couldn't even tell other co-op Malat. Is anybody, if it even got out at all, then they'd be harvested for their blood. I wish they had done just a little bit more to justify her secrecy.
Well,
Beyond
I'm not
that-
sure.
What's that?
Well, go ahead.
No, I was just I don't have any other notable thoughts beyond that on the Abronians themselves, though.
I did like the moment at the end when, after Giovanni surrenders and they're on Book's ship to go back, and it's like Discovery, so people are either going to clap or hug, and Tilly and Burnham hug.
Yeah, I it's another one of those things that, like, in the quasi-military vibe that Starfleet has always had some part element of, it still feels a little out of place. But I kind of like the idea that if people were so moved that they would, and this is a setting, a organization that is not going. Nobody is going to look down on them for that. In fact, it's probably encouraged. That I think that remains pretty cool to me.
It is kind of a cool thing. I mean, like, oh, look, like this entire society, species, whatever, like they almost were destroyed in a catastrophe, and now they get to settle their new home and live. And I hope there was no like pre-existing life on this planet, because when they rolled up in their moon, like the gravitational waves probably caused like huge tidal shifts and like continents moving in different directions, and
I'm sure
all
they
kinds of
programmed
crazy
it.
stuff. But
I'm sure they programmed it to not do that.
yeah, I mean, like you said,
Fatheree,
we don't know much about them, so they could be assholes.
Yeah, they're like
they're gonna be the villains of season 5.
Fatheree, I also want somebody to go in for a hug on some other Discovery crew member who's not a hugger. Like Saru is like, nope.
Yeah, or maybe Linus.
I
was going to
want
say
him
that.
To shut him down. Somebody asked last week in our comments where Linus was.
He's in this episode. If
Was
you're
he?
paying close attention, yeah, you have to really hunt for him. I actually saw his name in the credits at the end, and I was like, where was Linus? And then when I rewatched it, I was able to spot him. But one thing I was going to say about this is I thought what might have sold Burnham's dedication to like bringing this person to justice, and which kind of weirded me out and made her seem too much of like a real life American police officer cop. But I think instead of killing this, as cool as I think that commander was, instead of killing this unknown guest star that they just got like some Canadian stuntman to come in and play for 2 minutes of screen time, instead of doing that, some people are probably going to hate me for saying this, but they should have killed someone that we already knew that Burnham actually would care about. And I think that would have sold her dedication a little bit more. And I was thinking, who would you get rid of? Because they don't want to like fire any of these people. I think they make it clear like they want to bring all these actors back every year. I'm talking about like the secondary people, Reese, Bryce, Owo, Detmer. And I was thinking, Linus. If you killed Linus, because that guy he plays a bunch of other alien stuff as well as Linus, so he still gets to have a job. And you just get rid of Linus. Like, we know Linus enough that the audience would still care, but we're not so familiar with him that it would like truly devastate anyone.
Right.
I think that's what I would have done.
I think, man, people would have. It would have definitely made the ending, the question of whether it was worth it all, seem more difficult, because even killing a minor but known character feels awful in a series. It's like you can blow up a world, like have Kirk find out that like the Doomsday Machine destroyed a whole planet or something like that, or the Space Amoeba did. And it's kind of like, oh, it means business, and that's all the reaction you have. But if it were to take out, somebody on the Enterprise that's known, or any known character, it feels like it's hitting you where it hurts, like them too. And in a way, that is kind of what I wanted to say. Is like I both felt like sometimes, in that way that things come too easy for the Federation. I would like to see that, maybe the doling out the dilithium is still something that there are pragmatic limitations on. And I would have liked to have seen like, okay, maybe we feel it's worth them trusting the Navarre to their cultural side of it to play it their way. But like, what if the family of the guy who died, made a big ruckus? Maybe he's trying to rally people and say, hey, the Federation's just getting reformed, and this is the kind of thing that they're going to let happen. Like, he could have put the family of that dead guy could have put some serious pressure publicly out there. And I think it'd be interesting if they challenged themselves a little bit. If it didn't feel like somewhat easy to trust the Navarre, that there wouldn't be pressure from other factions to not trust them.
I'm also not really sure what people would want for justice. And if this is, anything like the Federation that we know, there's no capital punishment. The only death penalty is if you go to Talos 4. So I'm not really sure what people would expect.
Obviously, you get assigned to the Discovery like Burnham did. So that person, she just becomes a crew member. Yeah, no, I don't either, but I actually think those might be interesting questions to discuss. I know they don't want to dive too deep onto, I don't know, the penal system of the Federation. I don't really particularly want to hang out there too much. I like the idea that they are overall a not, seemingly a more benevolent justice system than we have right nowadays.
Yeah, they're more geared on rehabilitation as opposed to.
But I think I would not have
the prison industrial complex and transferring taxpayer dollars to those entities, which is what in the United States criminal justice system is based on.
I wouldn't have minded at all if they had shown that, she's given herself up, and find out that, what is Navaran justice going to be, or Navar justice? I don't know what they.
Yeah, I don't know if they're Navari. To me, Navari seems obvious. I don't know if they're Navar, Navari, Navarian, or what, but
they could just be Navar.
My vote is for Navari, but yeah, Vulcans. They live on Vulcan.
That's too close to the Navi from what do you call it, Avatar.
No one cares about that though. That's been irrelevant for a decade.
I know, and yet somehow it made a lot of money, and it's a big ride at Disney World. But anyway, I personally would have liked to have seen them poke a little bit more at what would be the just thing to do here, because it's not an easy question.
Well, let's talk about the ending.
Yep. Let's see.
They do kind of get on some of the frustrations with that. They kind of do hang a light on that, but before we get to that, there's some other stuff. Mama Burnham gives Tilly some advice on choosing your path by looking inward with absolute candor. And Giovanni is turned over to the Navar authorities. Vance gives a speech about orchestras, and Tilly waters some plants with Saru, because I guess she's trying new things, even though you don't fuck with the whatever that one plant with the swamp, the Kemp swamp, whatever, Kemp swamp bloom.
Swamp kelp
bloom.
Yeah.
But I did kind of like some of the Mama Burnham stuff on book ship going back, where she does tell Tilly the co-op Malat, we're all about that whole thing about choose your path. Like when we say choose we're basically saying the path you're on is at an end. Choose to do something else. You got to stop what you're doing now though, or I'll kill you. And so when you don't have a co-op Malat pointing the sword at you to tell you that, you might not always realize when you're at the end of the path or on the wrong path, or when you do need a new path. And the only way to figure that out is to look inward with absolute candor. I kind of liked that. It was a co-op Malat stuff that I really liked from Picard, and it ties very well into whatever it is, whatever the hell they're doing with Tilly. I think it was good advice.
What did Tilly says something like, what if it's not was she like, what if it's not a literal death but a metaphorical death or something like that? And I like that idea of trying to look at their philosophy in sort of a more nuanced way.
Yeah, and I'm a bit forgiving about the Burnham stuff I disliked, because Burnham does admit that she was wrong, and she was now that I know that this person was trying to save an entire civilization, it certainly does put things in different context, and I need to reevaluate the way I feel about it. Yet she was still kind of pissy when the president just turns Giovanni over to Navar.
You know what? If I was Burnham, I think my anger would be directed towards Giovanni in a sense that I would say, why didn't you ask for help? Why didn't you find a way to ask for help? Was it your pride? Did you need to be a martyr to save these people?
They don't want to focus on how dumb that part of the plot was.
That's probably true.
And if I didn't have to analyze these episodes as deeply, the first time I watched this, I liked it a little bit more, and then when I had to think about it with my critical hat on, I was like, oh yeah, some of that stuff does feel a little too forced. I still like it, so I again for the 47th time. I don't want to sound like I'm beaten up on this episode. I had a lot of fun, and I'm still very excited for season 4. The best stuff of this episode, in my opinion, we haven't even gotten to yet. We're going to get
And
to
by
it
the
a
way,
little bit.
Father, I will say this. I can be suckered in. I can be pulled in by a cop drama, even just like some random. Like I don't watch a lot of them, but if I were to watch a random CSI or something like that, I'd probably have a pretty decent time. I can still. I grew up attached enough to the genre tropes that I can enjoy them and usually ride them without thinking too much about. I guess I'd say real world consequences. And so that was the part that, for all that I poke a little bit at some of the motivations in this, I was very much enjoying the kind of procedural nature of it. So
I liked Vance's speech that he gives about, it sucks having to put up with the president, but that's her job, is to be the conductor. Yeah, I love the way this was very well thought out when he says, like, I'm the drum section, I'm providing a beat, keep everyone going in line, and you're he says, the first chair violinist, you're doing all like the showy solos and everything. It's like, oh yeah, that's like Michael, she's like the Kirk, she's like the, the go-getter, the one, the star of the show, the center of the spotlight. And I also thought that, like, oh, that's so cool and kind of humble. He is not just any admiral, he is the commander of Starfleet itself. And he's like, I'm the drum section. I thought, that's still a big deal to call yourself the entire drum section. But I thought that was a kind of a humble way to, to look at your own role. And it does kind of speak to the nature of collaboration that I thought was kind of fun.
Right, and then she, I don't know if you outright said it, but he says that the conductor is the president.
Is the president.
And that the conductor basically has to see the big picture. The only thing I didn't quite like, he just said something like, we have to have the faith or trust or whatever that the conductor knows the piece and can see the broad strokes in a way that we can't. And I'm like, that almost seemed to elevate the conductor to a level that I'm not sure, that felt almost a little too powerful. Like, nobody should be above being questioned. But as a broad metaphor, I think it works. And I liked that Burnham's like, what did she say? Like, that's a whole lot of metaphor or something like that.
It's a whole lot of analogy, I think.
Analogy, yeah.
And then he says, well, they pay me by the word. That sounds like a writer's room joke. That's like when they're breaking the story, like one of the writers says like this speech about orchestras, and another writer is like, that's a lot of allegory. And then they're like, oh, well, we get paid by the word, don't we? Or it was some type of like writer's in joke, I'm sure.
I see Trekkie Dave had mentioned in the comments that Starfleet can't give away fuel to individuals, and so that why does it need to be explained? And I'm like, but like, couldn't she essentially requisition it on behalf of this world's, which is like a whole species, essentially a planet?
It said because she didn't want to give away their location to anybody. And
right, and that's the thing.
Maybe there's untrustworthy elements of, like, they kind of mention a possibly rogue starbase in season 3. That we're trading with the Emerald Chain. So maybe she did have reason to like not trust Starfleet or think there might be corrupt elements within Starfleet.
Yeah, it's just one of those things I'd want to have been brought up. Yeah. Like a specific thing, like, oh, I would have loved to have gone to big protective Father Starfleet. But they, there's just too much risk of it getting out, et cetera,
someone in Starfleet stealing the latinum out of their blood, or some.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. I think the episode still works in spite of that, even though that part didn't work for me. But I don't know if I don't have anything else on the Ace story other than Tilly and Saru. We got to see his room full of all the plants, which he probably took off of Discovery at the end of season 3, but then put back on to Discovery. Because he did move off the ship. But 30-second technology is probably pretty easy to. You might even be able to replicate these plants. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's just a nice character touch, and I was also happy to hear him. He was talking about being in contact with his village council, right?
Oh yeah, like he had to go vote on something. They're upgrading their starbase because they're returning to space.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty big thing and a nice sort of a hopeful Trek thing.
I'd like to see Earth return to space and stop being isolationists. So maybe we'll get into that at some point in Star Trek Discovery. But I'm ready for the B story whenever you are.
So, after the events of last week's episode, Stamets is determined to unravel the mysteries of the anomaly, and Book is determined to help. They visit the Navarre Science Institute. Unfortunately, Stamets' theory that could finally explain the cause of the anomaly is disproven, and it seems like it's back to the drawing board. It's not all bad, though. Book is able to process some of his grief thanks to a presidential mind meld, which seems to help him begin to heal. Hey, nothing like a good mind meld occasionally to clear the sinuses.
So I guess the anomaly has a name now. It's the DMA, the dark matter
Sure.
anomaly.
Yeah. I, it's probably good to have a name, something to hang the name on. I'm neutral on it. It's not super scary. It sounds like a scientific classification, which it kind of is. What did they call it? A proto wormhole, right? That's what
that's the new theory.
Or that's what he was
So
trying to prove.
Yeah. Last week it was roaming binary black holes. This week it is a primordial wormhole.
But minus the tachyons needed to prove it, meaning that obviously it is, as I theorized, the what is it, Father? I said last week from Star Trek Generations. It's the
Nexus.
It's the Nexus. It's some spin-off of the Nexus.
Well, there's a theory that I don't actually think is going to be correct, but a lot of people in our subspace transmissions wrote in about. Maybe we can talk about that at the end of the show. But as far as the primordial wormhole thing, these Vulcans go into their nap time meditation and shoot that down pretty quickly. But I did like Book, wanting to go on this mission, go with Stamets. More like that. I never would have expected like the two of them to be like these science buddies, but it's pretty cool. They did a good job justifying it last week, I think. And so I like seeing it continue on here. I like, Book's determination of like, I got to help, whatever way I can. And Stamets trying to give him stuff to do. Stamets also being concerned about his well-being, be like, man, I'm going to have to go in like the super detailed, probably like 47-minute long description of like every little thing that happened to the destruction of your home world. And like, do you really want to be there and have to sit and listen to that and relive all of that? So I like seeing like that concern from Stamets, and then his reaction to these Vulcans when they go in like their meditation state. And Stamets is just like, what the hell? Can like we review the schedule? Like it's science time, not nap time. Like
I like seeing asshole like Stamets. Yeah, I always enjoy it.
I think he does run a risk. We talked about this years ago, but does he run the risk of like kind of playing into like the stereotype of a gay dude, of like
a snippy gay guy?
Yeah, like what you might call a bitchy queen, or what they used to would call. But I think they've done. I mean, I shouldn't speak for the community, but I hope that they've done a good enough job, representing the queer community, that there's room for all those different facets. And
sure,
there should be a guy who's like that,
right? And he's clearly counterbalanced by the sort of always much more grounded Dr. Culber, so that you have a pretty, even if it was just the two of them, at least certainly not a singular perspective. But I happen to like bitchy Stamets, and so I hope it does not go anywhere.
Yeah, I liked bitchy Stamets. I liked sad Book, and I liked compassionate and concerned Tarina, and the stuff with her and Book, where she's saying like, like I can't fix you. Like you need to spend years studying Vulcan disciplines to suppress your emotions. I can't, do that for you right now. But he had this line of dialogue, a drowning man only needs one breath, which I would have tweaked that. I would have said, like, a drowning man would do anything for just one breath. Because if you only need one breath, it's like, oh no, if you take one breath, like, you'll still drown. Like, you need more than one breath to live.
But you would be desperate for even the one if that's what you could get. Yeah. I think you're right. That would be a slightly better piece of writing.
But we got the classic Vulcan mind meld, and so I like the mind melding still a thing in the 32nd century. And there's actually some really good science here, where basically they're saying we have to review the events of the destruction equation and see if there is a a blue glow. That'd be the radiation to indicate tachyons. And that sounds kind of silly, but it's actually, Dave, believe it or not, that's very scientifically accurate. I looked into this a little bit, and the Cherenkov radiation, I think is what it's called. That's a real thing, and it does produce an actual blue glow. You can see it with nuclear reactors underwater. And if tachyons are, because the tachyons are a hypothetical, theoretical particle.
Right.
They may or may not exist in real life. They exist in Star Trek land, but real life, the jury is still out on it. But if they do exist, I'm told by people who understand the science better than me that they would produce this Cherenkov radiation. So there actually would be a blue glow to tachyon activity, possibly.
Very interesting. God, I feel like I was going to say something about that, but then I got distracted. I thought it was. I liked seeing a mind meld with sort of their modern effects and all that, and I like the sort of surprise turn in it. Of course, that Book should be able to remember something he'd been suppressing, which was a sort of a happy moment. Well, actually, like a completely undeniably joyful moment for him that we gave him something to hold on to as the man drowning in the sea inadvertently. It was not intended, but it was one more thing that he had kind of blanked out. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Last week we had a lot of people in the comments wondering, or like I saw several people mentioning, why does Book feel guilty? Why does he think he could have done something? And I think part of it is, stuff that we had guessed at. He's an empath. He felt like he should have sensed it from the planet, something. But they did get more into that this week, a question of could he have spotted something and that kind of thing.
Yeah, they spell it out. He explains that to Tarina. And so I guess this was one of those things I described at the top of the show that I said was a little murky. I would have liked more clarity. But I guess the comfort he gets is that he wasn't sure if his nephew Leto heard him, I guess, say "I love you" when he's like "walk Leto walk" or whatever he says.
Yeah.
When the little kid's running away. So I guess like when he replayed his memory, he was able to pay attention and actually notice that he did see Leto look back or something. And so now he's more at peace now that he knows, like, oh yeah, my nephew knew that I loved him. David Ajala sells it well. So.
This kind of brings up something that I think a lot of people who lose someone suddenly have to deal with, which was, what was my last interaction with them, and does that something that makes me happy or not? And I think if there was an argument or even sort of mixed terms that you left on or whatever, obviously it can feel terrible. In Book's case, I think it was almost more like the just not knowing if the kid felt connected to him, and he knew from this memory beyond a shadow of a doubt that he did. So yeah, that was bringing up that sort of age-old question. He kind of got lucky with the dice, and not just lucky. I mean, he forged that relationship with the kid, and luckily now it's something that can ground him.
And I like Stamets, wanting to comfort Book, like, oh my god, I'm so sorry you had to relive that, and we didn't even get proof for my theory, but Book saying like, oh, don't be sorry, like it actually worked out for me, and just the message of that of sometimes it's hard to grapple your trauma and anguish, but a lot of times the healthiest thing to do is to process that.
Right, and there might be a reward that you haven't thought of.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we get to end with now that he's allowing himself to think about Quajon and reflect on it, and he's able to embrace these warm memories. You see the holographic recreation of his world, when he's laying in bed with Michael, and then when Michael tells him that he looks peaceful, he says, in the moment right now I am, and I love that they added that little detail, like, oh, he's not done healing, he's not completely recovered, but he's on the road to recovery. He's allowing himself to have this moment of peace. He might have a breakdown and start crying about it the next day, but as for right now, this is the first time he's really felt at peace. So he is starting to recover, starting to heal.
Yeah, I like the. I was just thinking of the sort of visual symbolism going on here. That a lot of times when we saw him reflecting on it before, he was kind of hunched over and inward, looking at monitors and things like that. And here we see him laying back, open, allowing Burnham into his space. It's a visual metaphor for the kind of the freedom he's feeling, at least in the moment, unburdened by guilt.
Yeah, and wearing his amulet, which I wonder, was there any other Quajon off-world when his planet blew up, or that might be the last one of those amulets, the last drop of the world root, the world
Quick
root
chug it.
sap.
They did mention in the what?
I was thinking, what if like Linus is like, oh man, like I just like drank this like weird sap, like what is this?
It does seem like something he would do. They did mention, of course, in the previous episode that they were looking that like the Federation was trying to find out if there was anybody else off world. I think they said at the time they hadn't found anybody, but they could certainly open those doors if they wanted to.
Do you have anything else on the Stamets and Book story, or are you ready to talk about?
I like seeing
Adira
them
and
continue
Gray?
to work together. I think sometimes that there's dividends that pay off just from putting sort of unusual characters together. I don't know if they had thought about this in the previous season, that they would have a connection and that they would play it out as a long-term thing. Or
I don't
if
think
just
they ever had a scene together. They didn't have a single scene together in all of season 3.
Right, but they retcon. Well, I guess I'm just trying to figure out, was that intentional, or did they just, when Book remarks that you hadn't really talked to him in like 5 months, is that kind of retconning in that they, that Stamets was kind of deliberately avoiding him, which I think is a neat bit of writing to do, even if it's just taking something that they just didn't happen to have scenes together, and then you kind of like, oh, maybe they did that. Maybe that was because Stamets was avoiding him. I like that. I think that's a good way to handle it's an opportunity that they had and they took it, and I like that.
Yeah, it for sure pays off, and it's one of the reasons why so far I'm liking season 4. I think more than the previous 3 seasons. Things like this that I'm just really really impressed with how well they're pulling it off. There is certainly, as much as I complained about there being some dumb stuff in this episode, there is a degree of thoughtfulness that is not always present in the previous seasons. I'm going to talk about my favorite part of the episode now, the Adira and Gray stuff. Guardian Z, we met him in season 3 from on the Trill homeworld, but he holograms onto the disco, using that hologram tech from last week's episode, and he's there to assist Culber in the transferring of Gray out of Adira's head and into the fresh new body they made for Gray. And it's uncertain at first if the procedure works, but Gray can eventually feel Adira reaching out to him, whatever that meant, and is able to finally, wake up, come to in his new body. There's also that cool bar scene that they hang out in. Lots of DS9 references, and that's a pretty cool looking bar. They're using the old transporter room set. I guess they don't need a transporter room now that everyone has the Tricom badge that has mobile transporter. But seeing Gray and Adira happy and smiling and all of that stuff pay off. That I think they're kind of cute together. I like when they're happy, and more thoughts on that in just a second. I want to say the thing that's impressed me with this is how well it is a allegory. Again, I'm not part of this community, so I probably shouldn't try to speak for them, but I believe, and I've heard people say that are in this community, that this is a really good allegory for those experiences, and there's a lot of little details in here, like
well, but just by the way, the basic one that's been going on from the beginning, that Gray is insubstantial, right? Literally in Star Trek, but for someone coming from the LGBT community, a metaphor for the way that they are, the world treats them very often.
Well, yeah, but the way that they're doing this with allegory is that they're still able to have like this brighter, warmer, better future, without making it just as shitty as the real world. But they're not doing everything with 100% allegory, to where like they're not actually doing trans and non-binary characters. They're doing like some weird like alien allegory, like how Deep Space Nine did with the did with the Trill.
Right.
So, but they're taking like those actual characters, so you're still representing those characters with those characters, but you're using the allegory to tell those stories relevant to today, and it's things like Gray being invisible, and how they talked about this a little bit on the Ready Room, where they had the actors Blue Del Barrio and Ian Alexander, I believe, who plays Gray, but they were talking about how like a lot of times when you're coming to terms with being trans or non-binary, and how you don't look like your true self, the world doesn't see you, the real you. Maybe you find like that one person you connect with and they can see you, but no one else can see you beyond that person. They represent that. And there's so many other things in here I noticed, like the the desire to be seen for other people, but also the significant other being concerned about how it might affect the relationship. I got in a relationship with someone who's always presented as this gender, but now they're trying to transition. Like I know in real life, just from people I know, like that can be a big deal for a significant other to deal with. And they said in the future episodes they will address that with Adira, being concerned, like, oh, like Gray used to just be this figment in my head, and now how is this going to change our relationship? And so that fear is represented. The finding a supportive found family, that's been a huge thing in the queer community for a long time. If maybe you're not as accepted with your birth family, but you're able to find other people that embrace you, and you can get that emotional support from them. Going through a medical procedure to obtain the body that represents who you are is represented here with the procedure with the golem and transferring Gray's consciousness. So all of those things are presented in allegory. And again, like, I don't mean to speak for the community, but just on my observation as someone who has tried to listen to that community, I think I'm seeing these things represented in a very impressive and graceful manner, and I'm impressed that the show has pulled it off. I'm not surprised at the ambition of Discovery to try to tackle something like this, but I am impressed with how well I think they are doing it.
Fatheree, I would actually, I don't know how much, say, Discovery has been covered in like famous, like the notable LGBT magazines like The Advocate, but I would love to see what they have to say about it. And so get some more thoughts from the big talkers in the community.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I think also I was noticing that in addition to the the sort of the medical side of a procedure for transitioning, that by bringing in this something that of course they did on Deep Space Nine, and prior to that had symbionts and all that, had that shown up on Next Generation?
In one episode, yeah.
One
host,
episode.
I believe. One of the Next Generation one-word
But by bringing in the sort of more spiritual side of the... God, why can't I say the people who are the Guardians?
The Trill?
Just Trill, yeah. Just bringing... I mean, it's the Trek allegory, that's the metaphor that they've been using, but it's got all the positive things that we associate with the Trill are now or continue to be associated with the trans community. So it's something in some ways more positive than it is in our world, where it can feel like the support isn't there. And there's such aside from the fact that everybody on the Discovery is supportive, there is this whole culture of it on Trill, and that's something I'd love to see. This guy seemed like the Guardian in this seemed like a cool dude.
Yeah. And Brian brought up a very good question earlier. Why would the Trill be okay with the idea of taking experiences out of a symbiont, when the whole thing is that the symbiont lives a very long life and accumulates all these experiences? But I think it is actually explained pretty well in that this was a very unstable joining. It was an emergency thing they did when Gray died unexpectedly, and they had to use a human as a host. And so I think it was probably unhealthy for Gray to have to exist like that in that current state. And it's not totally unprecedented. In Deep Space Nine, in that episode Facets, when Odo got basically fused with Curzon, and the new Curzon Odo entity was like, hey, I like it like this. And the Guardian was just like, I guess just stay like that. That's fine. That's cool. So, so it's not wildly inconsistent. But yeah, it is cool to see that. Yeah, the Guardians being those agents of support. But that's Oh, and like I don't know, the idea of like you holding his hand overnight, I guess, is what made him come to. I kind of wish they might have had either something like took a little bit more effort there to pull off, or but whatever, it's not a big deal. I love everything else about this so much. Again, I think it might be the best thing the show has done, and I just want to give an open invitation to any trans or non-binary Star Trek fans who want to talk about this, because I'm not qualified to talk about it, but I just want to give an open invitation to let you know, like let me know, send me a message on Twitter, and we'd like to have you come on the show and talk about that with us.
Hell yeah. Well, Fatheree, shall we? I don't have any major final thoughts. Shall we move on to the Gorn eggs?
Sure. So not a ton of Gorn eggs, but I just want to mention these are all our Easter eggs, in jokes, and continuity connections we found in the episode that I thought were worth bringing up. The USS Credence, NCC 2804. I complained about it being an old-style ship on the interior, but the 2804, I think that puts it in between the Excelsior and the Stargazer. So if this is like a late 23rd century, early 24th century ship, it kind of would explain why it might look like the Discovery on the inside.
Do they still have ships? Any ships that are that old? I thought that everything else was.
They refitted the Discovery, so maybe they found other ships in mothballs after the Byrne.
Okay.
That they're refitting. That's my story. I think it might just be like an old ship that they had to refit to 32nd century. Now, if the next time we see the interior of a 32nd century ship and it looks like the Disco interior, I don't know if I'm going to be able to use that same excuse, so I'll have to come up with a different no prize then. But on the ship, however, we do see a Vulcan nerve pinch. Not a huge deal. We've seen that on the show before, right? Except it's being performed by a Romulan, someone who looks like a Romulan. Javini has, the forehead of a Romulan Northerner. And also the fact that Javini was able to telepathically pick up on that distress call, the telepathic distress call. It's a very Vulcan thing, like Spock hearing V'ger, something like that. So we are seeing that fusion of Vulcan and Romulan. I just wanted to bring that up, that, someone who looks like a Romulan can do a Vulcan nerve pinch and has Vulcan telepathy.
Probably would have been cooler for the commander who got stabbed if he had gotten nerve pinched too.
Yeah, you'd think. But Guardian Z mentions that he's performing the Zientara ritual or procedure, whatever. That's not what we were talking about in the Deep Space Nine episode Facets, when a Guardian came and performed that on Deep Space Nine, where the past hosts of the Dax symbiote were able to be transferred into the Deep Space Nine crew members. And Dave and I talk about that in somewhere when we were doing our Deep Space Nine Season 3 talk.
Mm-hmm.
And then the idea of a planetoid being hollowed out and used as a ship, Dave, that's not as far-fetched as it sounds after all, because Star Trek did that way back in the 23rd century in the original series episode, For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky.
Yeah, I forget if they got into it much at all in that one, other than to say it was a thing that was going on. I haven't watched that one in some time.
Yeah, it's kind of a lame Season 3 episode, but
look at those nice robes they had, Father.
It has a special place in my heart for reasons I'll tell you off mic.
Fair enough.
President Tarina mentions having some warm red spice to calm Book down. That was something from the Deep Space Nine episode Second Sight. That cocky scientist, Syetic, he made like a really badass stew with Vulcan red spice. He was like great. He's great at all these things, and O'Brien wanted his stew recipe. Also, she mentions the Araminu ritual. I would have called it Kolinar, but she uses this different word for just the practice of suppressing your emotions. That's actually a term that came from a Star Trek novel in 1983 by Diane Duane called The Wounded Sky.
By the way, I it's been so long I don't remember it well, but I did read that back when. It was right in sort of the heyday of my Star Trek 2 and 3 reading the Trek novels era.
Oh, nice. And then the bar that we see has I this is weird coming from me, the ultimate Deep Space Nine stan, but I almost feel like this is too on the nose Deep Space Nine references. But I mean, like we see a Ferengi bartender, and in the same shot with the Ferengi bartender, you can also see Linus. If you look in the background, he's playing the piano. He's sitting at the piano. But yeah, there's a piano. There's also a Lurian like Marn.
What if
Morn.
it wasn't Linus? What if it was just another Linus species?
Well, they credited Linus in the end credits. So.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
So there's a Lurian like Warren, and of course there's the dartboard, like Julian and Miles would always go to throw darts. But they used it the same way Deep Space Nine used it here, where they could have Adira and Culber shooting darts while they're having a conversation, and it's more visually interesting than just two people sitting at a table or walking down a hallway while they're talking.
Yeah, I always remember that in what was the lawyer movie? Tom Cruise, Jack Nicholson, Can't Handle the Truth.
A Few Good Men.
Few Good Men. There's a scene that in the play that it was based on was just a conversation, but in the movie they made it a conversation that takes place in a batting cage where Tom Cruise is like practicing batting while they talk. Same idea.
And then in the subspace transmissions, I'm just going to go through these real quick because y'all were very talkative. We got a lot of responses on last week's episode, but we did ask people to let us know on Twitter or through YouTube comments or contacting me directly with an email or however you like to get in touch with us. But we wanted to hear your thoughts on last week's episode, and we want to hear your thoughts on next week's episode. But as far as last week on the episode Anomaly goes, Zach on Twitter said, "Really worked for me. I'm one of those Discovery fans that wishes the show would slow down sometimes, and this season is really working for me in those regards. Love the uniforms. Book's plot in this episode was brilliantly performed and also really landed with me." Charlie on Twitter said, "Solid ongoing evolution of the crew, but slow in coming. Good to see them interacting without Michael as the focus. My big quibble is the size of the anomaly. I realize that's part of the mystery, but really needs to be explained further next episode."
I don't think that was explained further next episode.
No,
but...
it wasn't. Charlie goes on to say, quibble number 2, open flames continuing to spout intermittently on the bridge with no sign of fire suppression measures. Yeah, a lot of people didn't like that. Me and Brian didn't like it. Marcus on Twitter also didn't like it, so the episode was good. The flame cannons on the bridge were not. Jason on Twitter said, "I'm still confused as to why the astrobiologist is somehow the ship's chief engineer all of a sudden, and where's Jet Reno?" I can answer this for you, Jason, that Jet Reno is not going to show up until like halfway through the season because Tig Notaro was unable to go to Toronto to shoot the first half of the season. I don't know what their in-universe explanation. I just assume that she's always like, whenever they're on the engineering set, she's just like right outside a frame, but she's there. We just don't see her. Scooter on Twitter said, "I loved the episode as a whole, but I especially loved Stamets' vulnerability when trying to relate and talk to Book. I think a lot of us have been there when working or interacting with someone we weren't necessarily comfortable with. It felt very real." Yeah, Stamets did have that kind of some realistic hesitation going into that situation. Ty J on Twitter said, "Better than the last episode. The anomaly is a very intriguing storyline. However, the explanation for the Byrne was so patently absurd. I am skeptical that the anomaly will have a satisfying explanation." Totally with you there. I'm going to be nervous until we get to the season finale.
Same Z's.
No, here's a popular theory on the anomaly, though. A lot of people are comparing it to V'ger from the motion picture. Pat on Twitter said that it might be caused by V'ger evolving yet again. And Jeff on Twitter is comparing pictures of the look we saw the anomaly at the end of last week's episode as compared to some of the V'ger interior. And Chantel on Twitter said, "Burnham told Saru Book's grief. She did not know how to reach him. Saru replied compassionately, 'If loss has taught us anything, it is that each of us must sit with pain our own way. Sad but true. We all deal with death differently.'" Favorite part of the episode. Dave, you pointed out what a beautiful line that was.
Yeah, I was really into that.
And then our friend Trekkie Dave, who's here with us live right now, he left us a long comment. I'm unfortunately not going to have time to read the entire thing, but I know he's also a big fan of the motion picture. He also thinks that the anomaly might be connected to V'ger. And opinion no one cares about said, I still maintain, even though I know it's not canon, that the planet is called Navarre because it's populated by the native, first letter N, inhabitants of first letter I, Vulcan V, and a Romulus R. So that basically spells Navarre. I think that's a great way to remember the name of Navarre. So,
Yeah, that for all the school kids out there that are going to get quizzed on this later, keep that one in mind. That's good.
yeah. But that's all we have for this week's episode. We will be back next week, live Friday night, 7 p.m. Central, to discuss Discovery Season 4, Episode 4. And if you're checking us out live right now, be sure to go over to the Starfleet Boy After Dark channel. I have a feeling in about 30 minutes. He is going to be live. I'm not sure what they're going to be talking about over there, but I'll try to hop on to that show, and it should be a lot of fun. It always is. Until then, we will be back next week. Live long and prosper, y'all.
Listen to the Tex-Trek podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or at tex-trek.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tex-trek, and follow Fatheree on Twitter at TXTrek. Please support us by liking our videos and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. Thank you and take care.